I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you about changing the way that you think and thereby changing the quality of your life. We live in our minds and not in the world. So often we believe that we live in the world because we can see it, because we see it with our eyes, we hear it with our ears, and we believe that the world in which we live is real. And it is to a point. But we believe that there is a spiritual dimension to life which undergirds and sustains our physical life, and that our physical life is here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to teach us the spiritual lessons that we need to learn. That this world is transient, changing, and moving, and that there are certain dynamics and laws that take place on this planet, on this plane of existence, that do not exist in spirit. And so we are invited to see with spiritual eyes and hear with spiritual ears beyond what we see in this physical life. Who is it that you look to as a spiritual teacher in your life? Maybe it's a minister or a priest or a rabbi. Who is it that you really believe gives you the spiritual direction and help and guidance that you need? I'd like to submit to you that if you change your way of thinking about your spirituality, if you change your way of thinking about who and what it is that gives you divine inspiration, you might be more dynamically empowered and life might be a more positive experience. I'm not talking about challenging any belief system that you have. I'm not talking about your changing any religion or church or any denomination that is important to you. I'm only inviting you for the next few minutes to embark upon a process of opening your mind and changing possibly your mind and your thinking about what it is that spiritual guides and directs you. I gave this same talk some time ago in our church, and when I asked the question, who is your spiritual leader or teacher, some of the people who were present said that I was. And I would submit that I am not a spiritual leader or teacher. I may be a part of that process, but I am no one's primary spiritual teacher or leader. Others said that it was God who was their spiritual teacher. And certainly God is a part of that dynamic, but I would submit that God is not the strongest, most proficient, and most dynamic spiritual teacher that any of you or any of us have, not minimizing the reality and the importance of God. As a clergyman, I have a certain role. But if people look to me as a spiritual leader, they're really getting shortchanged because I am only available to them a limited amount of time. For those who come faithfully to our church or those of you who watch this program, you see me talk for 10, maybe 15 minutes a week. And then in the church service, maybe there's an hour of interaction where I am dealing with the congregation, sharing thoughts and information. After church, maybe I stay and have coffee and talk to 10 or 15% of the people who are present, and I'm there present for another 20, 30, 40 minutes or an hour. So at best, there's an hour and a half, an hour of 40 minutes during the week that I'm available and accessible to people. Even if they call me and make an appointment and see me for another hour or two, and no one does that every week, we're talking about only 2 or 3 hours in an entire week. That's not the kind of spiritual instruction and guidance that any of us need. We need dynamic, ongoing instruction. Some people maybe think of books or television or radio or classes, but all of those things are limited in their time. They're limited in their scope. And important as they are, they're only a part or a fragment of the true spiritual instruction that we all receive every day, every week, every month, and every year of our lives. I would submit to you that the true spiritual teacher, the true spiritual leader and guide that you have in your life, that I have in my life, and that we all have, are the people with whom we interact every day of our lives and the experiences that come to us. If the people who come in contact with us are the spiritual teachers and leaders of our lives, and if the experiences that we have in our daily lives are the culmination of spiritual education that we have, then we know that we are being educated, we are being fed, we are being guided, we are being directed, and we are being led every day in 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 ways. Spiritual direction comes to us always and everywhere. It isn't limited to 1 hour or 2 hours. It isn't limited to a class or a church. It isn't limited to a person. It isn't even limited to God. in that infinite presence, because all of us go through the process of living our lives, and as we live our lives, we are detached from people, circumstances, and situations. We are even detached from God. But it is the culmination, the combination of all of the experiences, all of the people, and all of the time that we spend that should truly and really, in truth, be our spiritual guide, our spiritual education. Your family, your friends, your co-workers, they are the people who bring you spiritual lessons. They are the people who guide your thoughts. And it is God in them and God in you that allow you to absorb the lessons that you need to learn, that we all need to learn in this life experience. We believe that the physical experience of life is simply a school for the soul, that we are all in a spiritual educational process, a grand and magnificent revelation from God, and that each one of us is brought into this life experience to gain the education, the knowledge, and the spiritual awareness that we need in our spiritual pilgrimage or quest. God is infinitely important in this process, but God brings to us the experiences, and we, together with the dynamic of divine principles and laws, bring into our life experience that which we need most for our realization of greater good and spiritual understanding. Even the people with whom we have great difficulty, even the challenges, the pains, and the sufferings of life bring to us lessons that we need to learn. And in the midst of our happiness and our sadness, in the midst of our joy and in our tears, in the midst of our successes and in the depths of our failures, we can be fed spiritually, emotionally, and physically. In our church, we sing a song that is called, "I Behold the Christ in You." That song invites us to behold the Christ, or if you're a non-Christian, the divine presence within every person. We are invited to see God, to see the essence of spiritual reality in everyone. And we are invited especially to see that presence in the people whom we seem to feel are unlovable, people with whom we have nothing in common, people that we don't necessarily like, to see the Christ in them. Christ Jesus, the great and magnificent way shower, taught us and implored us to see the good within all people, and we are invited to do the same. If we're able to see all people and all experiences of life as learning experiences, then they become for us the substance of life. They become for us the source of our education, the source of our guidance, and the channels through which we learn how to deal with life. If we behold God in the midst of every circumstance, if we see God in every person, even in the midst of our illness, we can be well. In the midst of poverty, we can be rich. And in the midst of our tears, we can come to be happy, because we can do it by living in our minds and not in the world. Therein lies the key. The lessons are spiritual, not worldly. And the experiences of your life and my life are experiences in this physical realm, limited to this physical realm. But the spiritual truth that we gain from this physical experience is of tremendous and magnificent value. It feeds us, it sustains us, and it allows us to expand our consciousness, our awareness, and our lives. In every situation of life, we have a challenge, and the challenge is to either see the experience, the negative experience, to see the challenging person in our lives as an opportunity for overcoming, coming to know something, or an opportunity to simply be in an unhappy and negative state of consciousness and mind. It isn't anything that happens to you that makes you unhappy. It is what happens in you that makes you unhappy. If you're in a good mood and driving down the street in your car, the radio's playing, you're happy, you're going somewhere that you're looking forward to go, you're in a wonderful mood. Something happens in front of you, someone slams on their brakes, and your car rear ends the car in front of you. Immediately, your consciousness is challenged to either remain in the presence of that pleasing, happy, peaceful consciousness, or to immediately change your mood and your consciousness, and to embrace a negative vibration and thought process. When we're challenged in life, such as an experience like the one I just recounted of hitting another car, it isn't always possible to hit the car and immediately be joyful. But it is possible to hit the car and to immediately condition your thought process and the way that you're responding to the circumstance and situation, and not allow it to dictate how it is that you feel and how your mind is operating. No one has the power to make you angry. Only you have the power to make yourself angry. People may say things, people may do things, but it is in your mind that you are either centered in peace or you are centered in anger and chaos. It is by seeing the reality of all of these experiences as positive, affirming learning experiences that we're able to embrace the concept that all of the experiences of our daily life are the true spiritual teachers that we have. There's a movement across the country that was begun by a Lutheran minister's wife called the Lord Change Me prayer groups. These prayer groups meet for the sole purpose of supporting one another with prayer, and they meet on a weekly basis across the country, and they pray about the needs that people have. They don't pray for those circumstances and situations to be changed. They don't pray for anything to be removed. They don't pray for anything to be given except that God would change those people's thoughts about what's happening to them. Very important for us not to want to change what's happening as much as we want to change what's happening inside us, in our being. A number of years ago, a lady in our church came to me for some counseling. Her husband had died of a very lengthy illness, and he had suffered a particularly painful and debilitating type of cancer. And she had watched his progression of this disease, and as he moved towards death, inch by inch, she was touched by his suffering and by his pain, and she never could reconcile herself to this fact. Ultimately, he did pass from the physical experience. He passed away, and she moved out of the area. And she continued to correspond with us at the church and correspond in terms of the difficulty that she was having dealing with the fact that he had suffered so much. And then after a number of years, she wrote a beautiful card to the church, and in that card she said that everything was all right because she had had a dream about her husband. And she saw him whole and well and strong and healthy. And he said to her, "Don't worry about what happened to me because it never touched me." She thought that it was touching him. She thought that he was experiencing, and certainly he was experiencing the pain. But what he was telling her was that in the midst of the pain that he experienced, he was not being touched by it. He had been able to transcend the experience. And so he went through the process, and he appeared to be suffering, but he was perfectly all right. He was not touched by it. And that dream freed her. And she changed her way of thinking about the transition that her husband had made. She decided to change the way that she felt about it, the idea that she had. And with it, he brought to her a great and wonderful lesson. If we could not be touched, if we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the infinite love of God will always provide so abundantly for us, that even if we appear to be suffering tremendously, that the love of God has a sustaining power that keeps us from being totally impacted and devastated by the circumstances and situations of life. An excellent example of this is if any of you have ever visited someone right after a surgery. Most people have great discomfort after surgery. And when we talk to them, they're suffering tremendously sometimes, and then the medications come and the medications help. If we talk to someone some days after this experience has taken place, and we talk about the tremendous pain that they had, they often recount by saying they don't remember. There is a wonderful and magnificent mechanism within our spiritual being that protects us from dealing with any kind of pain that is too much for us to bear. And even though it appears to be otherwise, the reality is that every experience in our life brings us lessons, glorious and magnificent lessons that teach us And it is the spiritual lessons that we learn from the people around us and from the experiences of our life that create for us the spiritual truths that we need to learn and that we need to come to know. We believe in prayer as a centering force, and we'd like to invite you at this point in the program to pause for just a moment of reflection and prayer. Eternal God, we unite our hearts and our minds in your divine presence, and we give great and wonderful thanks for all of the spiritual teachers that come to us, for the people and the experiences of our lives, both the happy experiences and the painful experiences, both those people with whom we have great love, admiration, and respect, and those people who are challenges to us. We embrace them all as wonderful and magnificent spiritual messengers and teachers. We do this in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
That was a wonderful admonition that you just gave us. And I heard self-responsibility is the keynote of all. We have to be responsible for our own actions, for our own looking to God for a divine guidance. And we can look to our teachers, we can look to other people, people we admire, people we trust to give good information. But ultimately, we ourselves have to do the work. No one else can do it for us.
And as we do the work, and as we learn the spiritual dynamics, truths, and laws, then we become so empowered and so strengthened that it doesn't matter what happens to us. We are empowered to deal with it in a positive and wonderful way. A great example is the life of Christ Jesus. Many, many challenges, many horrific things in his life, right up to and including Calvary. But in the midst of all of it, he had a sustaining grace within because he understood the dynamic spiritual principles, and that, after all, is what he came to teach us. What he was able to do, we could do and more.
And greater things than I have done shall you do because I go to the Father, he said. And that's a wonderful blessing in our lives. And you are a wonderful blessing in the lives of your parishioners. And I'm sure that you do the same way in your business work that you do in the church work, where you put the responsibility for each individual right on themselves. And that's the only way people can grow and live and produce.
Very important that we are all responsible.
Yes.
And good things happen and bad things happen. But the bad things that happen are so limited. Some people's lives, of course, have great tragedy, but those things are limited to the earth plane. We need to understand that. And so often we look to God to remove it, to take it away, to take away the suffering, the pain, the separation, the limit, the lack. But what we need to do is to see beyond it. And as we see beyond it, we're able to embrace a different and a new reality. And then the circumstance will change.
And the happy and successful people are able to do that, each in their own way. And they look to others for information, for guidance, but they make their own decisions. And we see that happening when we look at successful people, whether they're successful on any level, monetarily, in any way. That's the person who looks to others for guidance, and they respect the views of others and advice, but they make their own decisions.
They make their own decisions. And an important aspect of our ministry and of New Thought is not telling people how to live, but not giving them the solutions, but giving them the resources.
Right.
And once people have the resources, then it's up to them to take those resources, those spiritual truths, and apply them to life.
Yes. As you were speaking, I was reminded in my own mind of a letter I wrote last week to someone who had come to me for counseling, and she needs to detach in her life, to not become so attached to the negativities that are happening around her with her friends and specific family members. And as I wrote her a note on detachment, it just brought home what you were just saying, that we, in essence, you were saying in part there, we have to learn to detach and then get on with our own lives in the way we know best, and not be condemning of others, not be judgmental, and realize they have their reasons for doing whatever they do, but it doesn't have to touch us. And that's what you said so very well.
Very true. And we can't look to God to do it.
Exactly.
You know, so often I think people believe, and I think we've been taught from Sunday school on up in the traditional church, that when things go wrong, we turn to God and ask God to take it away. So It isn't God permitting, allowing, or causing any of this to
Exactly.
happen. God has nothing to do with sickness or limit or lack or any of the negative influences of life. Those are created by our action and our interaction on the earth plane with other children of God. God has no interest in manipulating your life, my life, or any of our lives. God is a constant, and those laws and principles that God has put in motion sustain the universe. Now, it is not possible for him to simply pull the strings of my life and your life. And yet, so many people, and especially traditionalists, have that view of God. God has nothing whatsoever to do with our daily lives other than being constant in the source of strength and love that he sends to us.
Exactly, and they stay busy prodding and prompting God and saying why, instead of getting in there and doing it.
Or asking God to take something away that has happened or some tragedy. And what has happened.
Yes.
And I think that's an important aspect too, and it has to do with personal responsibility. If you are sick, you are sick. If you have a limit of resources, you have limited resources.
Yeah.
Whatever the condition in which you find yourself, that's where you are.
Exactly.
And it is from that point that you can move. By denying it, by denying the reality of what is, will not help you. But denying the power that that has over you is the empowering strength. And I think many people in New Thought, in our own movement, would disagree with me. And so they would say, if you are sick, don't be in your sickness. Well, we say that, don't be in your sickness, but don't deny your sickness.
But what is.
What is. Deny the power that that sickness has over you.
That's the important.
And if you are sick, you are sick. And from that point, you can move into the conscious awareness of your wholeness as a child of God. It can very well be that your physical body is going to be sick.
Yes.
And I don't care how well we live, how spiritual we are, or what good enlightenment we come to understand, we're all going to make the transition. We're not going to manifest ourselves into eternal life here, and we don't want to.
And we're going to have problems in our physical bodies because our bodies are deteriorating, and that's part of life, and it's a basic fact of life. And if we accept that and just do our best we can to maintain healthy bodies, then we know that our bodies are not going to stay perfect forever.
So many people, even in our truth students in New Thought, when they become ill, one of the first questions, and I'm sure you're faced with this too when we make a hospital visit, is how can I have cancer?
Yes.
How can I have had a heart attack? How can this have happened to me? When in reality it's happened. So why worry about what has caused it to be? But you are whole and strong, and whether your body is or isn't is not the issue. What's happening inside all of us is what's important.
That's right, and honor that basic tenet, that foremost facet of spirituality, that God gave us free will. And in that free will, we need to work and maintain and keep our being. And if we don't use our free will, then we're denying that that's our God-given right.
And free will is very important. And that issue of responsibility, take responsibility.
Yes. And in the hospital visits that I made ward rounds regularly for a couple of years, and there was two women that always have stood out in my mind from those days, and they were women who had taken their own lives, responsibility for their own lives, but they still had unanswered questions. And as you said so well, that we need to look to others to answer our questions, and even if they don't give us the answer we're looking for, it'll trigger our thinking so that we do get the answer we're looking for. Just the fact that we're looking ensures that we will get that answer one way or another. But one lady said to me, would you pray to that Jesus of yours that I die right away? And I said, well, why would you say that? Why would you make that request? And she said, well, I'm Jewish, and I've asked everyone I know to help me, and I just want to ask, I want to get all the help I can because it's time for me to go. She said, I've had 5 major surgeries. They want to do another one. And my body, I'm 93 years old, she said, and my body just doesn't want another surgery. And so I said, when you put it like that, I certainly will. And you pray verbally first, and then I'll pray verbally with you. And we did. And then my rounds were in the afternoon, and she died at 7 that evening. And it was so nice that she was able to go like that. And it wasn't because I prayed for her, it's because she prayed, I believe. And it was her time to go, and she probably knew it. And she was just released in such a beautiful, easy way. But the fact that she reached out and asked help, I think, it wouldn't matter who it was she asked the help of, helped her go more quickly and easily and smoothly.
And the willingness to accept
Exactly.
that which is,
Yes.
and not to fight.
Yeah,
The
right.
great thing we have have need of is learning to detach,
Yeah.
learning to detach from life,
Yeah.
and learning to rise above the circumstances and situations in which we find ourselves.
Yeah.
And those are key elements to
Yeah.
spiritual growth.
That's right. And the other lady was, she said, I'd like to know something. I would give anything if I can meet someone who believes in reincarnation. There's questions I'd like to have answered. And I said to her, well, I believed in that since I was 5 years old, and perhaps I could answer some questions for you. And she couldn't believe that I talked with her for a time and she didn't realize that. Well, she asked specific questions about her own specific life, and then she was able, and she said I could die happily if I could just have a few questions answered. And again, she died at 11 that evening. And again, I don't think it would have mattered who she had asked. It's just the fact that, like you said, she opened herself to ask another person for answers. And the answer she really needed came to her from the inner planes of being, not from my lips.
Mm-hmm. And your work in past life therapy has given you the ability to share information with others in the
Yes,
same area.
yes, in a very valuable way.
Yes. Life is an interesting process, and we're always invited to embrace it and to learn from it. And Reverend Freelander and I have enjoyed sharing these concepts and ideas with you regarding confident living. And we hope that you'll look to the experiences in your life and to the people in your lives, both the happy experiences, the difficult experiences, and the challenging people, as spiritual teachers and guides. And we look forward to seeing you next time.